Picture a room. The lights go down. A cake comes out with candles burning on top, and suddenly every single person in that room, people who have never once rehearsed this together, begins performing the exact same ritual in perfect unison. They know the melody. They know the words. They know when to clap. Nobody handed them a script. Nobody announced the rules, and yet, here they all are. So when exactly did we agree to this? That question sounds simple. It isn't. Because when you pull on the thread of birthday celebrations, where the candles came from, where the cake came from, where the song came from, what unravels is a story about power, about fear, about commerce, and about the very strange human need to mark the fact that you exist. Let's go back, way back, around 4,000 years ago, in the kingdom that would eventually be called Egypt. Something happened for the first time in recorded history that looked a little like a birthday party. But here is the crucial detail most people get wrong about it. The ancient Egyptians were not celebrating the day a person was born from their mother's womb. They were celebrating the day a pharaoh was born into godhood, meaning the day of his coronation. In their understanding, that was the real birth. The biological one barely counted. The pharaoh became divine the moment he took the throne, and that anniversary was observed with offerings, feasting, and what we might recognize as ceremony. So the very first birthdays on record were not about individuals at all. They were about power, about marking the moment a man became something more than a man. Now move west. Move to ancient Greece, somewhere around the 5th century before the Common Era. The Greeks had a different version of this ritual, and this one is where things get visually interesting. They would bake round cakes, round to mirror the shape of the full moon, and they would place lit candles on top to make the cake glow. Then they would bring the cake to the temple of Artemis, goddess of the hunt and of the moon. The smoke from the candles was not decoration. The smoke was the point. They believed the smoke carried their prayers and wishes upward to the gods. Stop and think about that for a moment. You have blown out birthday candles. You have made a wish. You were, without knowing it, performing a prayer ritual that originated in ancient Greece over 2,000 years ago. The mechanism survived completely intact. Only the theology got quietly removed. But here is where the story takes its first dark turn. For roughly 1,000 years after the rise of Christianity across Europe, birthdays essentially disappeared. Not just fell out of fashion, they were actively condemned. The early church fathers viewed birthday celebrations as a pagan practice, which, to be fair, they were. The theologian Origen, writing in the 3rd century, stated plainly that only sinners celebrated their birthdays. He pointed to 2 birthday celebrations mentioned in Scripture, the Pharaoh's in Genesis and Herod's in the Gospels, and noted that both occasions ended with someone being executed. His conclusion was that birthday parties were not just frivolous, they were morally dangerous. For centuries, that view held. The common people of medieval Europe lived largely without any formal acknowledgement of their birth dates. Most peasants could not have told you the year they were born, let alone the day. The calendar was something priests tracked. Individual birth dates were not recorded with any regularity. You might know you were born around harvest time or just after the first frost. Precision was a luxury, and the idea that your personal anniversary deserved celebration was considered not just unnecessary, but vaguely suspect. The rich and the powerful were different, of course. Royalty kept records, nobles threw feasts. But even then, these celebrations were about dynasty and succession, not about the individual as an individual. A king's birthday mattered because the king mattered to the state. Your birthday, farmer, did not matter at all. So what changed? The answer, like so many answers in modern life, starts in Germany. In the late 1700s, a tradition called Kinderfeste began circulating among German-speaking families. Kinderfeste translates roughly as Children's Festival, and it was exactly what it sounds like, a celebration held on the morning of a child's birthday. The child would wake to find a cake already waiting, already lit with candles. One candle for each year of life, plus one extra. That extra candle was called the light of life, representing the year ahead, the future not yet lived. The child would try to blow out all the candles in a single breath. If they succeeded, the wish they made would come true. Here it is. Here is the recognizable shape of the thing. A cake, numbered candles, a single breath, a wish. And it was for children specifically. Not pharaohs, not gods, not kings. Children. Ordinary children. This was a radical idea dressed up as a party. As the 19th century progressed and industrialization spread across Europe and into North America, two things happened simultaneously that turbocharged the birthday ritual. First, record-keeping improved enormously. Births were being formally registered by governments in ways they never had been before. For the first time in history, ordinary people had documented proof of when they were born. The date became real in a new way. It was written down. It was official. Second, and perhaps more importantly, the greeting card industry arrived. By the 1800s, printed cards for various occasions were already circulating in England and the United States. Birthday cards became a product, a thing you could buy, a way to participate in a ritual without having to be physically present for it. The birthday was no longer just a family moment. It was now a commercial category. Factories printed them. Shops stocked them. People bought them because not sending one started to feel like a small social failure. The birthday had become, quietly and without anyone voting on it, an obligation. But there is one piece of the modern birthday that has a more specific origin story than any of the others, and it is the piece that most people assume has always existed. The song. In 1893, two sisters in Louisville, Kentucky, both schoolteachers, wrote a cheerful little melody intended as a morning greeting for their students. The lyrics they wrote were simple. Good morning to you, good morning to you, good morning, dear children, good morning to all. Mildred Hill composed the tune. Patty Hill wrote the words. They published it together in a songbook for kindergarten classrooms. Somewhere in the years that followed, someone, and nobody has ever conclusively identified who, replaced the words. Good morning became happy birthday. The song slipped into circulation in its new form during the early 1900s, passed from person to person the way folk songs pass, with no clear point of origin and no clear owner. Except there was an owner. Or at least, there was a company that claimed ownership. In 1935, the Summy Company registered a copyright on a specific piano arrangement of Happy Birthday to You. That copyright was eventually acquired by Warner Communications and then by Warner Chappell Music. For decades, that copyright was enforced aggressively. Restaurants that sang the song to customers were technically required to pay a licensing fee. Film productions that wanted the song in a movie paid tens of thousands of dollars for the rights. It is estimated that Happy Birthday to You generated roughly $2 million per year in royalty income at its peak. A song that no single person had fully created. A song that had emerged from collective, unattributed use. A song that felt like it had always existed, like a fact of nature, was privately owned and generating a fortune. In 2013, a filmmaker named Jennifer Nelson was making a documentary about the song and decided to challenge the copyright legally. After years of litigation, a federal judge ruled in 2015 that Warner Chappell had never actually owned the song's lyrics in the first place, only a specific piano arrangement. The song was declared to be in the public domain. Every birthday party that had ever happened had technically been a copyright violation. Or none of them had been. The legal reality had never matched the cultural one, and that gap between the legal reality and the cultural one is actually the most important thing about birthday celebrations as a whole. Nobody ever agreed to any of this, not formally, not consciously. Pharaohs celebrated their divine coronations, and the idea of the birthday as power entered the world. Greeks lit candles on mooncakes, and the idea of the birthday as wish entered the world. German families gave their children morning cakes, and the idea of the birthday as personal milestone entered the world. Greeting card companies built supply chains, and the idea of the birthday as social obligation entered the world. Two schoolteachers wrote a classroom song, and the idea of the birthday as song entered the world. None of these people were coordinating with each other. Each piece arrived separately, across centuries and continents, and somehow they assembled themselves into a single, globally legible ritual. There is something almost eerie about that. A tradition with no founding moment, no committee, no decree, just slow accretion, layer on layer on layer, until the whole structure became invisible, the way the ground beneath your feet is invisible, simply there, simply assumed. Think about the last birthday party you attended. Think about the exact moment before the song began. The shuffle as someone turned down the lights, the small collective inhale, the first person who dared to start singing because someone always has to go first. And then the wave of everyone else joining in, relieved that it had started without them. In that moment, you were standing inside 4,000 years of accumulated ritual. Egyptian coronation, Greek moon worship, German children's festivals, 19th century commerce, a stolen, copyrighted, public domain folk song. All of it compressed into 30 seconds of slightly awkward group singing in a kitchen. The candles burn down. Everyone waits. And the person at the center of it all closes their eyes. Because that part, the closing of the eyes, nobody ever taught them to do that either. And yet everyone does. And they make a wish that belongs only to them, in a ritual that belongs to no one. Maybe that is the answer to the question of when we all agreed. We never agreed. We just kept showing up, generation after generation, adding one more candle to the cake, and somehow that was enough.